He's up to it anyway. Righto team, we'll get back underway. So the next item in front of us is the item 7.5, which is on page 122 of your agenda, and that's the Whangamarino Waikare Options Action Plan Working Group update. So it is a bit of an information report, but they're also seeking guidance, staff are seeking guidance on project structure and the role around governors. So we have Mike Scarsbrook, who is obviously chair of that working group. Over to you, Mike. Oh, sorry, Tracy, did you?
No, we can go straight.
Yep.
Sorry, if I can, Mr. Chair, just say one thing. So this is an update on the Whangamarino Action Plan Working Group, so the work that has been going on. It is one of the business cases. You had the updates on all the business cases in your agenda on Monday, but this is the committee that the regular reporting will come through. And when I say regular reporting, it's not going to be monthly, but in the right kind of cadence, it will give governors the oversight. One of the matters that has been lingering about from mid last year was the role, what role elected members play in that Whangamarino working group space. Staff have put up a preferred option that Mike will take you to, but obviously we can work with any of the options that have been suggested, and also the chair will outline Councillor Nichols' option that she sent around last night that I've made, that Mike and I are both aware of as well. Thanks, Mike.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors, for the invite to come along. I'll just go through a couple of sort of overview slides just to refresh folks' memories and summarise the report that you've all read. The catchment, Lake Waikare, Whangamarino wetland and many of the other waterways are in a highly degraded state, and we've seen increasing concerns about the state, particularly of Whangamarino wetland, which is internationally recognised as a Ramsar Convention wetland. And also Lake Waikare, we're now in an almost permanent state of algal blooms and warning signs to stop people swimming there or recreating. 2 years ago now, we came together, the Regional Council brought together a group of people to look at a response plan, a short-term response plan, which was about improving how we operationally work together, DOC, Fish and Game, ourselves, iwi and others, to respond to significant events like we had after Cyclone Gabrielle. That response group recognised there was a need for a longer-term action plan and response to improve and restore the lake over time and the wetland. And so that response working group evolved into what we have now, which is the Whangamarino Action Plan Working Group. And that working group is helping us deliver the Whangamarino Action Plan, which is what was funded through the recent long-term plan. So we've committed to delivering a collaborative process to identify a Whangamarino Action Plan that will be delivered by June 2026. The main part of the funding has come through WRC, through its long-term plan. Waikato River Authority has also contributed significantly, primarily to support a significant amount of iwi engagement through the whole process. We take as the vision for our work Te Turi Whaimana, which you'll all be aware of. The purpose then for our work is to help give effect to Te Turi Whaimana within the Whangamarino catchment. So that's the vision we're working to. There's a whole range of existing objectives, and those have come through various pieces of work done by ourselves, landowners and others over the last decade or couple of decades. And those objectives will continue to evolve as we talk to people in the community about what they would like to see the lake and the wetland looking like in future. Just to give a visual representation of the catchment, and I just highlighted there, this is something that came out of our co-governance meeting with the Raupatu Settlement co-governance committee end of last year. Was we were asked to show on the map where the marae are within the catchment. And so there's 7 marae, so quite a high density of marae within the catchment, and obviously significant values for iwi in that catchment. The process that we're working through, we've recently completed a draft of the Whangamarino Action Plan, and that was primarily based on existing published information. So we'd had feedback from some stakeholders that there'd been so much previous work done, they didn't want us to sort of go from a blank piece of paper. They wanted us to reflect and reflect what had been done previously. So that's pretty much where that first draft is at. We're now starting a phase of engagement with the community using different stakeholder groups, so subgroups, iwi, landowners, the community, and also technical science and mātauranga groups to get feedback on the issues, the objectives for the catchment, and the potential response options. The process will then be we'll assess those options, and we use similar tools to those tools we have in the Sustainable Infrastructure Decision-Making Framework, the SIDIF, which is currently being trialled in a subcatchment of the Whangamarino, the Motukaraka, and we'll then produce a second draft of that Waikare Action Plan by October. That will be a full draft with the suite of prioritised options, and as I mentioned, finalising that plan in June 2026. The project management structure, this is what it looks like. Apologies, it reads very small on the screen there. So we've got, in terms of the project delivery, we've got Tracy as our project sponsor and reporting to this committee. There's also a live conversation around the role of the Waikato Raupatu River Trust Co-Governance Committee, whether they are involved just in reporting or something more than that. So as I say, that's a live conversation. We have a technical director, and Sean's online for this work that we've contracted Sean as part of the project team. We've also got several key people leading those different subgroups. So we have Julian Williams coordinating the iwi engagement. We've also had another person from Ngāmuka, local hapu, who's going to work with Julian to manage that iwi engagement. We've got Science and Mātauranga subgroup, which is being coordinated by Oliver McLeod and the science team. Landowner engagement's being coordinated by Tracy Nelson within RUD, and community engagement and youth engagement is being coordinated by Liz Tapuhi, who lives in Te Kauwhara and preceded me in my current role here at WRC. So just a bit of background for, oops, sorry. In our September working group meeting, one of the things that was raised was continued involvement of councillors, Waikato regional councillors, in the working group. The previous response working group had councillors directly involved in it at the request of Chair Story, and that was to address concerns raised by some of the community about not having direct community and landowner involvement in that earlier process. The question was raised about ongoing contributions of councillors to the working group, and I took an action to seek direction from council on the role of councillors going forward. In the paper that we've put forward, I came up with four very simple options as a conversation starter. One is around status quo, so councillors essentially continuing to operate in the way that they're currently operating as full and active participants in the working group. Another option around them, I guess, taking a bit of a step back and acting as active observers. Another option around continuing, I guess, to provide representation for the wider community, noting that we've got one community representative, but that may be seen as a lack of balance. We might need more representatives in that space. And then the final one is that councillors step back from that working group, and this forum is how we report back and how councillors are involved in the process. So just to highlight, we're asking for your direction and advice, and yeah, very happy to take whatever direction you give us.
Thanks for that outline, Mike. So at this stage, I'll just bring your attention to Councillor Nichols' email. I assume you've all seen it. It's going around the council. So that's just based on the structure that fell out of the Whangamarino coast, and we ended up with a joint working party, which was the governance positions around the table, separate to the work that was going on in the community panel and key stakeholder space. Just from my view of being involved in that and then looking at this project, I'm not quite sure if this project is at that level of maturity just yet to separate and bring in a separate organisation. But as Jen notes, that the advantages to it, and I'll just quickly read them out, acknowledging that you have seen them. The community panel working group not get too big. And obviously this is related to some of the risks that Mike sort of highlighted, and can have free and frank discussion. Good separation between operational and governance for any entity involved, the opportunity for fair, equal governance representation, which means that there is that ability to bring on other governance positions out of some of the other stakeholders to a separate working group. A subset of WRC elected members then have the space to get into more detail than all other councillors, and we would still get updates, obviously, via Stratton poll, and no politician having to try and be a neutral observer. Might be a little bit hard for some compared to others, but so that's Jen's idea of a fifth option. So it's there and it's on the table, and open it up to questions for Mike and basically discussion around this. Chris, Tipper online first, and then Chris. So coming to you, Tipper.
Kia ora. Thank you again for putting the options up. I just note in my term as councillor, every triennium we try and do something for Waikare and Whangamarino. Starts off as a working group. By the time they get going, we're at this point in the triennium, say, tēnā tata, we have to do something. I'm okay with no councillors being on this because it's got a clear pathway back to council. I'm just wondering about our commitment to following through on the findings, and if there's anything tagged to the terms of reference about how that circulates between us. But if we reject it, it goes back to this group. I'm just, again, testing the logic, because that's what we did in Healthy Rivers. Thoughts from the team?
I think we've said that the response plan will identify what's considered priority actions, and then we would bring those back in the next LTP for implementation. So unless we see quick wins, which are within the scope of the current project, implementation of actions is out of scope of this current work. But we've signalled, and I think we signalled in the business case as well, that implementation actions would be the subject of a program of work in the next
Okay, so
LTP.
maybe I'm too many terms ago, but we did a plan for Waikare and Whangamarino.
Yes.
That's the plan that they're going to consider and prioritise, or are they starting again?
So you talk about the Lake Waikare Whangamarino catchment management plan that was done in 2018.
Yes.
Yes, so that's essentially formed the basis of the
Cool.
first draft of the action plan. One of the commitments made in that catchment management plan was to develop a suite of actions specifically for Whangamarino wetland. So we see what we're doing is consistent with that catchment management plan. But it does mean that, yeah, we probably will reiterate many of the same things that were talked about in that catchment management plan as priority actions.
Thank you. I just don't want that effort to be lost. Appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Tipper. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Warren. Mike, just a couple of questions. To me, the bigger the committee, the longer it takes and the less action gets taken. So I just want to make sure that we don't have too many people in the room to slow down the process, stops action being taken. And I want confirmation from you that there is a landowner group up there who have got an active Lake Waikare, and you're aware of that because you've been to one of the meetings that I went to. I want to make sure that expertise, because it's a long-standing expertise, goes back a long way. There's a lot of knowledge in that group, and I want to make sure that they are represented in this committee. You can confirm that. And the other thing that you mentioned, there's a science class at Tikawata that have quite an interest in this as well, and I was against us going and educating children, but because they've expressed an interest in it, then I think it behoves us to have an ongoing feedback to them so they know what's going on, and I'm sure you'll do that at the appropriate time. And maybe your lady up at Tikawata is the ideal person to do that. So I just want to make sure those things are accommodated. In terms of council representation, I tend to agree with Pippa. We've got feedback coming from staff that are there, but I think it'd be useful to have at least one councillor as an observer as a minimum.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'm just going to get your comment
yes,
around the landowners' representation in that space.
Yep,
Councillor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. So, as I mentioned, Tracy Nelson in Rudd is coordinating the landowner engagement. The first of the meetings in that engagement phase we had on Tuesday with that landowner group, and Mike Peters and Peter Buckley, who are landowner representatives on the working group, were there. And they actually asked for the meeting, and was really a really valuable meeting because we very quickly got to some of the key options for improving outcomes. So we talked about options around control of koi carp. We talked around options for control of sediment inputs and outputs from the system. And we talked about options around the hydrology of the system. And specifically, there was interest in an option of flushing flows into Lake Waikare, which has been considered in the past and has always been on an action list. One of the challenges is some of those actions are very significant, which is why we've always signalled that implementation is not a spade in the ground. It's actually a coordinated and concerted and long-term program of work with significant funding committed to it. If we're talking about control of koi carp, for example, and finding ways around that. So yeah, really positive meeting with the landowners on Tuesday, and yeah, I think they probably recognise that they've Many of them have a long history in the catchment and have been through these processes several times. And yeah, like everyone else, they just want to see some action. And in terms of the school stuff, yeah, we've got a year 13 class at Te Kaupara College as part of their general science curriculum. Was it level 7 form? So we're working with them, essentially investigating different aspects, and part of that is they'll be going out later this month to Matahuru catchment with Matt Norris from the science team who's been working on the Matahuru catchment.
Oh,
Thank you. This project was a little slow in getting going, but I believe at the last meeting before Christmas, it really started to hit the road. At this stage, I personally believe the group is still in its infancy. You will see on page 125, bullet point 26, the project is progressing well with the first draft action plan completed end of January. As of today, I hadn't seen it. Mike tells me that he had sent it out on the 31st of January. For some reason, it's not in my inbox, but he showed me that I was on the mailing list. However, that's irrelevant at the moment. The issue for me is during discussions in that, I think it was the December meeting, Mike made some comments and I asked some searching questions, and from that, we were left to understand that the action plan was being developed by a group outside of this group to be presented to the group, which has been circulated. I accept that, Mike. And probably for adoption on Monday is the next meeting. And the expectation articulated was that the group would accept the other group's work on the draft plan and then take it out and communicate it and get feedback from the community. It's a pretty rushed program. So I'm still nervous about things. And when that was brought up, it was a really interesting and quite, well, it was good that iwi, in particular the hapu representatives, the young ones and the kaumātua who jumped in and said, you know, if we're developing a plan, we want in on the development of this plan. We want a word before it, you know, and so that opportunity will come. But there was some feedback to me directly. It was interesting. One of the Ropia members of the group, one of the kaumātua, said to me, he took me aside and he said to me, I think I can work with you. And what's come about is throughout our discussions, it's been quite evident that iwi across the hapu that have been there, they don't trust Waikare Regional Council, our track record. And having governors such as Robbie and I in the room, they have got a level of confidence that Waikare Regional Council is serious about finally doing something. And the fact that this council has finally put some money to doing something. I spoke with landowners this morning from that group and asked what their thoughts were on the makeup of the group. One of them said to me, if you're not in the tent, Noel, I'm out of the tent. And I said, well, I wouldn't want you to do that just because, you know, this shouldn't be about me. It should be about whether there's a councillor in the room or not. So I think people are nervous still, and we are still working towards a point. Now, one point that one of the landowners made to me was, if you put another committee over top of this committee, it's just another bloody hindrance to get the thing stopped. And so their expectation is this group reports directly to council, and council either accepts it, modifies it, or gets on with it. They don't want somebody sitting over the top intervening. Too many committees in the way. So I think there's a little bit of a way to go. I was told that you're our elected representative, so we expect you or Pamela to be there, or both of you. So I'm not sure what I think and where I stand, but the reality is I would possibly say that, Yeah, and there will come a time when I think it's right that councillors need to step back. But at the moment, I think it's giving a level of comfort and mana to the project that councillors are in the tent to sit as an observer. I think we'll be dragged into it anyway if it was that status, because people will want to ask, you know, your opinion or whatever, or you'll be dying to ask a question of something. So to me, I really don't know. And I get what, look, I know better than anybody about governance and operational, but I've worked in that situation for 17 and a half years and prior to that as well. And there are times when it's good to come together and there's times when you should stay apart. So just a little concerned that we're being premature in moving to take councillors, whoever that it might be, out of the tent. I'll leave it at that.
So thanks for those comments, Noel. I would like to hear your opinion of what should our position be in that tent. To me, you've just gone around in a bit of a circle and sort of, I'd like to see which side of the fence you're going to land on as such. And I believe that's the direction that staff are looking for. Is it status quo? Is it active observers going forward? Realising the state at which this project's at now, realising the frustration in that community of the time that's taken to actually get along with the job and get on with it. I think staff need a bit of clarity around whether it's yourself, whether it's another councillor or that. What is their position in that?
Okay, bottom line.
And Tracy's probably going to articulate
Yeah,
better than
bottom line here is, Warren, if I can, Tracy, for me, I walked into that first meeting on the basis that I'm here to represent the views of the community. That includes hapu, landowners, the wider community. So for me, and Mike may have a different opinion of this, but I hope my questions or contribution is about bringing clarity. And I do not want, I haven't tried to implant myself as to tell them what to do. That's the worst thing I think a councillor could do. But it's, my questions may at times have been challenging. And the other issue that comes to mind is, because of my background, I've worked in the Waikare district, Waikare region, all my working life, from police to courts to councils. I've worked in the Tikawara area in relation to the new subdivision Lakeside and the wastewater issues, and that brought in the wider catchment. So I'm probably lucky because of the in-depth knowledge, and also working more closely with ICM and all the issues, because I've been able to bring up issues. So hang on, we've got Motor Karakia over here in the catchment. They're trying to do something.
So you're interested in the seat now? That's the question.
Sorry?
Yeah.
The question is, are you interested in
so I'm
being a
getting to it.
councillor on the
Status
committee?
quo is what I would like to see, absolutely, but I'm trying to articulate the reasons why. So
yep. So I
if
think
you're happy with that, I'm
I
happy.
think the room gets the reason why. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tracy.
Because I'll just note, because just for the record, that I'm a constituent councillor in the same area as well. I've had just as much experience. In fact, I was part of the plan that this whole action is being moved on, if you need it for the record. But a lot of people have done a lot of work just recording it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not trying to denigrate anybody else's position, Tipper. The issue is it could be any one of us. But I think the mana of the councillor in the room is what's important, whoever it is.
Thank you. So we've got that status quo. Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really just wanted to reiterate the last comment that Councillor Smith just made then. We have, in conversations with some of the other stakeholders, they have said, well, what about if we wanted to call on Councillor Clarkson, Councillor Mahuta, Councillor Hodge, yourself as the chair? So this has been written agnostically, understanding that there have been some councillors who have participated more in depth to date, but from our perspective, it was like, okay, this is for any elected member who's invited along to any of the meetings. So just wanted to be clear.
Bruce.
Yeah, so I'm not deep into this, so I won't want to get too much into some of the detail that Noel's talking about. Seems to me, just from listening to stuff, that possibly at this stage status quo is the good option. But having said that, I'm more interested in not losing momentum for a project like this, and what we need to do during this, at the end of this triennium, I want to know what the timetable is for the report back to this committee in a way that we might be in totality, both this committee and the whole council might be able to leave a message for whoever comes after us. And that's the bit I'm most concerned about. So I've just now today heard about, you know, some progress in terms of identifying the key outcomes and all that rest. So, well, you know, at what point in this year and when will this opportunity occur in this council, Chair Warren, for you to assist this process of making sure we don't have the ball dropped between triennials? That's my main point.
Rosie.
That is an incredibly salient point in picking up what Councillor Mahuta spoke to at the very start of our conversation around we've started and stopped and started and stopped, and there's been a bit of oscillation in terms of momentum in the last 7 or 8 years. So it's very much Mike's mind, and Mike is dedicating as much time as he and the team behind him can to this project so that we don't lose that momentum. Very mindful that those you bring into the tent sometimes are and sometimes aren't those you want to keep on for implementation, because they are quite different. So at the moment, and as Councillor Smith said, and Councillor Hughes, we're wanting to maintain that momentum. I think if we jump to implementation and thought about it too much with the working group, at the moment we might get the speed wobbles. It's definitely something that we've talked about, hoping so that at the end of this triennium, we're in a good space and not a good space where next council comes in and unwinds it, that it's enough to platform off. And as we discussed in the LTP this time last year, we want a solid plan, so it goes in as the bid to the LTP. If some of the technologies that are being talked about, actually we want to investigate, we know the size of those, and we can say this is what needs to happen. So that implementation plan will come out, just not yet, but we definitely will bring it back to this committee with that certainty and clarity of implementation direction.
And
yeah.
my last, just reflect on the status quo issue. There's currently nothing stopping any of us going and sitting in the room and being observers or whatever we are. And so there's nothing stopping us. That's the point. But yeah, just make sure we don't drop the ball at the end of the train. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Very relevant.
It was just to pick up on Tracy's point here. It says here the plan will be completed by 30th of June 2026. So are we anticipating some feedback prior to the end of this triennium?
The answer to that, yes. Yes, definitely. But we also know the value of engaging people such as our landowners and the complicated stakeholders that this project gives to us. We need to let that have the time to have the conversations they need to have as well. But we're definitely wanting to make sure that this council, as the champions of this integrated project, are able to have something solid.
Can I just make one point, please? Can I just acknowledge, Mike, in a way, getting started, it was incredibly difficult, slow, and really wondered what we were doing and what the time was. But it was like herding cats. And there was a period where, and I don't want to be politically incorrect here, but amongst the hapu, they had to sort out who was their representatives. And there's been 1 or 2 changes, which new people coming in, the dynamics.
Again, as on my dial, no, they're my constituents.
Yes,
I'm better informed on the hapu. I'd rather you not speak to things that they're my constituents, say, unless you're part of it. It's not adding. Thank you.
The issue for me is it is their role to sort that out amongst themselves, and that we needed time for them to do that. So sorry, Tipper, that's what I want to say. So there has been a little bit to get going, but we also had to get credibility with them and other stakeholders that we are meaningful in this space. So please, Tipper, I'm not trying to cut across your role, but all residents of the Waikato
No, I appreciate, no, but I'm just saying they're not just my role, they're my relationship. So you're speaking into something that is my wheelhouse If you'd
Yes,
like to comment, you're free to, but be prepared for mine back, mate.
Thank you. I think we'll leave that there.
Yeah.
Thank you, councillors.
Mr. Chairman,
Right, so,
Me?
sorry, can I just add on, since I've heard, all the councillors speak and especially Tipper, does this resolution actually do, after this paper coming to us, does it do what the
No.
staff want?
no,
Because I read it as, it hasn't given them a steer on exactly, apart from we've heard from status quo, but what is status quo? From what I've heard from some councillors, it's not processing, as fast as it should be. So I just wonder whether that
I
resolution.
think that the status quo is just the relevance around councillors being in the room and their position in that room at this stage. So Tracy's just handed over to Jordan some reworking, so we'll just wait for that to come up on the screen. Tracy, do you
Yeah.
speak to that?
Mr. Chair, as Mike said, we had the action to seek guidance, so we've done that. For us, the active observer kept everyone safe in that room, and I'm not using safe in a aggressive tone. It just was clarity of role and function in that room. What I just do want to highlight, and Councillor Smith raised it before, is that there will be questions asked, and some of those questions may mean, we know that staff may have different opinions to elected members in the room. And I think there's just going to be a need to respect that. And as Councillor Smith said, when you go into these rooms, you have all kinds of pull-tie on, and you're taking them on and you're taking them off. But this is a working group. Staff will be providing the advice that staff provide. Elected members will be fulfilling the function, as Councillor Smith has said, of representing their constituents, not providing advice on council decisions, because that can only come from council, and just being respectful of that, but also just respecting staff and the role that they play. That for me, while we in this room will have many conversations where we don't always agree, and that's fine, just be mindful of that when it's playing out in the public arena, and just understanding that tension. That's the key issue that I see, and it may mean just being a bit more open in the communications. I don't know how Mike can be a bit more open, just the way he does business, but just being aware of things perhaps going into some meetings if there is a bit of discourse. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Karakia.
Confusing, but hey. So the recommendations that's in the paper compared to what's on the table, I can presume that meetings does the observer role for the councillors, and the status quo on the board is the same meaning, because, okay, so if the councillors are not going to be in that meeting and be able to speak with, like there's a no voting right, that's okay as long as they can speak, because their information they have is important. Whether they vote or not, I don't think will make a difference because all the staff is there. If the role says observer, then I'm wondering why we waste our time, as a councillor, because I wouldn't like to go to a meeting as an observer, as a councillor, and not be able to speak. So there's that difference. Also understanding in the terms of reference that if we are only there with no voting rights, then we shouldn't be able to speak outside of it. That should go back to whomever. So that should be made clear in the terms of reference. It's important because all of the years I spent up in Kiowa, we were totally involved in everything, but we had our staff as well. So it's important for me as a councillor, whoever's going to sit there for council, as they understand their role, we understand their role. So having them a non-voting seat is kapai, but if they're going to be an observer, why bother? It's a waste of time, money. You can't say anything, why bother? So here, they're taking around the wording, which one is right, which is wrong. I do agree that councillors should go or can go, or we should put someone up. I do believe, though, that the councillors who are going up should be the ones from that area. I wouldn't want to sit up in Waikato, so I don't know a damn thing about it, and I don't expect one of you to come and sit where me and Mikael are either, unless you want to just come and have a nohi. But other than that, observation should be with the constituent councillors.
Thanks.
And if
Thanks
that's
for
you,
that.
no, then that's you. If it's not, then get out.
Yeah, thanks, get her on it, yeah. No, do
It's
that.
not.
Ben,
You're a consistent councillor because you're chosen by the people. So you need to be involved where they are. Why bother putting my name up into something if I'm not from that area? It just waste my time. So I'd rather put you up, Noel, if that's where you're from, or Tipper, or Jennifer, or whoever. It's important that our people who are chosen to put us in an area are involved in what they are doing instead of me putting it up someone else's name.
thanks, get her on it, Ben.
Oh, it's just given that we've got a motion there with points 1 and 2, should we have a third point, just picking up what Bruce is saying, that we will have an initial report back before the end of this triennium? Is that going to be useful to add that in?
It's on our timeline anyway, as Mike showed you. If you just want belts and braces, more than happy to. Hmm.
Yeah, get her on.
Did I see somewhere on your first slide about dollars?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's not in the resolution around whether or not we're going to, whether we can or not agree or not agree to the long-term plan or whatever you said. What did it say? 400,000 from us and so much from WRA. So if you're not going to put this in a resolution today, when do we look at
That's
that?
already approved.
All
That's
right.
already in our long-term plan, get her on a year.
I'd like to argue
Yeah.
about the WRA. Okay, I'm all good.
So just to put Ben's point, it looks like we're crafting a number 3. So that everyone is clear that, yep, it will be coming back. I'm not sure there's a date in there, but
Sorry, I better read it because it might not be able to read my chicken. Oh, dear me. Sorry, through Mr. Chair, you might not be able to read my chicken scribble. So what I've written down is noting that a report back on project progress will be brought back to the committee at its August meeting. I think that's our last one for the triennium. I haven't got too prescriptive. It may be a draft document, it may not, but
Yep.
just we hear the intent.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dunbar-Smith. All those in favour? Right. Opposed? So carried. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
We have 2 items to go. The next item is item 7.6. And that's on page 136. And that's just an update on the regional adaptation planning summaries. Yeah, Alejandro joining us for that.
Kia ora again. You, Mr. Chair, I'll keep it very brief and bring your attention to the table in page 137 and 38, which is the very brief update on each of the project. Is recent developments in the shoreline management pathways work and further work that happened in the Karakia Plains Adaptation Plan. So it's essentially the meetings being held in November for the community panel and the Joint Working Party for the Karakia Plains project. And in terms of the Thames Commando District Council, which is the reason why we didn't do a report on the last strategy and policy meeting, and we brought it to you today, is the outcome of the roles and responsibilities workshop that the Joint Working Party had for strategy and policy. To highlight about that particular workshop is the key messaging about the statutory interpretation of the acts that enable the councils, in particular Waikato Regional Council for Flood Defenses and Drainage, to provide that level of service. So Warren was present in that workshop 2, so that is the overarching message is as local government authorities, we are enabled. So the acts are enabling, meaning that anything that we do is agreed with the community. So it doesn't impose an obligation on us to provide anything beyond what is contracted through a level of service. So that's just to highlight the outcome of that particular workshop. If you look at the attachment, there's a little bit more detail on the discussion that we had. And that is for page 139 for that particular discussion on the Thames Commando work that we did. I'm happy to take questions through you, Mr. Chair.
Tracy.
Councillors, just one comment. Some councillors would have been invited to the Waikato District Resilience Project. That has been deferred a couple of times at the request of Waikato District Council, just an FYI. I think we've got a date in the next couple of months. We also understand that that's really just been as a result of staffing and resourcing issues.
Thank you, Tracy. Ben.
Oh, it's just something I raised with Councillor Maher this morning as chair. Reading a report in the newsroom, I was surprised to find out that Hawke's Bay District Council is potentially being sued by its insurance company for a failure. Bay of Plenty Council has already been sued by insurance company. When we're going through these processes, it would be useful to have a bit of background on what else is going on to other councils, and maybe that's a report that could come through at some stage.
Yes, and thank you, Councillor Dunbar-Smith. Councillor Maher passed that on to me. I think the 2 workshops that we had towards the end of last year, which were facilitated by ICM, touched on some of these matters, but the currency of this information we can feed into this report for you, just to gather it. Obviously, if it's of significance, we won't wait for 6 weeks. We'll get it out to you through Councillor's email, but that's a really good point. Is there other context that's happening?
Yeah, because they suggested that if Hawke's Bay, for example, was found to be in breach of the clearing of the river mouth, the people whose houses were flooded are now looking at $77 million, and that might be reclaimed from ratepayers if the council can't pay it because the insurance people won't pay it. But the irony seemed to be there that the insurance company that was suing the council was also the council's own insurers.
Yes.
So there's a
this is an issue that the regional sector chief executives are watching closely. We are very connected and watching with intrigue the Plenty Regional Council and the Edgecombe matter, because whilst there will be some principles that will apply across each region, there will be some that will be specific to the particular matters as well. But it's definitely something we're watching, not only from an ICM perspective, but also Janine, now Director of Finance and Business Services, is across it from an insurance and liabilities perspective as well, what that may mean in terms of any claims we have presently, as well as what it may mean for our premiums and implications for that.
just on that, also in relation when we're sitting on the Wharekawa coast or shoreline management plans, it's useful to have that as a background too, because often the TAs have no idea of that discussion or, yeah.
Yep, thanks for that, Ben. Tipper online.
Just in a similar vein to Ben, adopting the planning summary, but actually our level of investment in it, are we saying we've got a plan with no spend behind it, or do we have the adequate resources attached to it? That's just a question for us too, Ben, in terms of your framework. It's one thing having the plan, another thing whether we're doing anything about it. So it's those actions and how we're keeping ourselves to that. Tracy, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mahuta. I actually just had a conversation about this yesterday with a couple of other directors. We do what we can with the resources that we've got available. There is very much to date a first in, first serve approach that we've taken with Thames Coromandel heading the pack, followed by Hauraki District Council and then Waikato District Council. We know we've had overtures from Taupo, South Waikato and Otorohanga District Council, as well as ongoing conversations with Waitomo District Councils. So at the moment, from a team perspective, we think, hey, let's those projects that we have already on our books, let's commit to those run those to a course before we start any others, see what capacity we have to assist some of the other councils, because they are in the formative stages of thinking. They aren't as developed as these, but also sit back, take a look and be honest about what is required, what is needed. It's actually more staff time, Alejandro and his team, than direct costs. The direct costs that are fed in through Rick Leifting's team and the spatial information team from data and tools. So it's something we're definitely looking at. I've got it on a document I created about new business cases for the 2037 LTP, but Tipper, it's something we're very cognizant of.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. It just, following up on Ben's point as well, the issue is on our risk agenda, so it's been covered off there. And also we had, some of you may not be aware, we had a couple of the government audit people from Wellington through before Christmas, and I had an interview with them. And it was something which I raised with them, because it's not just this regional council, it's the regional councils throughout New Zealand that are exposed to this risk. And I suggested it's something that should be considered at a central basis rather than being just liability being tossed back at individual councils. So we'll just see what comes out of that.
Thanks for that update, Chris. Ben?
Oh, it's just to clarify, Jennifer Nicol has invited some of us to Matamata our district council, who apparently also want to discuss this. Is that wasn't on your list?
Yes, it is. As I understand, and Alejandro will be present at Matamata Piako. They are starting to, bring their thinking together to make a noise. How we can support that, we need to look at in terms of reprioritisation of work programs, or just being honest about what we can do at this stage. So yes, you're right.
And just on the point Tipper was making too, when we came to Whangamarino, we made sure that the policy was that a user pays policy, effectively, that we weren't committing to something unless there was rates being rated for that, which is, yeah.
And just to be clear, we had those principles that we adopted September 2023 that were ratified by council. That was very explicit. So those are our guiding principles for any conversation.
So have you got the date for the Waikare district, or can you feed that out so that I can get to the diary, please?
I'll try.
Subject to change, of course.
Thank you, Mikhail. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and I'd just like to add that comment around getting the Whaikawa piece into our annual plan. It was great to see the fruition come through of that project. Again, obviously timeframes were always an issue, but thanks very much again to staff and councillors that were involved throughout that whole project. Not just the three of us that were there at the end, but those that put the effort in the early days.
Just on that comment, it's interesting to note that Whangamarino was looking originally at possibly $60 million to do the work they wanted done. And we ended up there funding $150,000 through the rating process. So there's a gap between what you can do and what you would ideally like.
Yeah, that's what happens when you deal with aspirations. Anyway, we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. And our final item. This isn't public excluded, is it? Excluded. Oh, anyway, so item 7.7 on page 145, and this is our submission summary report for February 2025. Alejandro, you're back up.
Thank you. You were all part of the discussions on some of the items that we highlighted here today. So the resource management, consenting, and other systems amendment bill. To bring to your attention is the submission that was endorsed by council on the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi bill. So that was a late addition to the council meeting, and we've highlighted the main points of the submission there from the organization. And then we have one outcome, which is the proposals on regulations for natural hazard information in LIM. So council would have seen this submission on the regulations before, but this is just to highlight that the regulations will come into force in the middle of 2025. And then noting the proposals for the contents of the regulatory standards bill. So this was staff comments on the likely content of a bill on regulatory standards. You would have seen that this piqued some interest in the media about what it might mean in terms of 3D principles. So what staff noted is that there's a bit more work to do in terms of developing regulatory standards, and that the corollary of transparency and efficiency is good. However, there's gaps in the analysis, and there's a lack of clarity on the impacts of treaty settlement and treaty obligations that organizations who actually exercise the regulation have. In terms of the proposed principles, staff feedback noted that there was issues in arbitrarily issuing these guidelines to interpret the principles. This tends to normally be a matter that the courts do through legal interpretation in case law. And in terms of the treaty, it was just feedback noted the omission of treaty principles from the regulatory standards bill in itself. Further, staff highlighted that the government decisions to make the timeframe for submissions was very, very short. It happened over Christmas, and it was provided very limited opportunity for us to bring it to council and have a more robust discussion with our elected members.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Yeah, councillors, just off the back of what Alejandro said then, the submission periods have been incredibly short. The other discussion document that staff provided comment to was the reforming of the Department of Conservation program, regulatory program. So where they are discussion documents and the timeline is very truncated, then either Lizette or myself has a delegated authority to sign that out. Obviously, any comments that we make are consistent with previous council direction, but where it is a bill, we will always try and get it to council. It's just, I didn't think anybody wanted to come in on the 10th of January.
Thank you, Tracy. Speaking order, I have Mikhail, Clyde, and then Ben. So, Mikhail.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Tracy, is it possible, just going through all these submissions and appeals that you've done, especially for my area, and considering what's been in the agenda today with submissions through to central government, is it possible that I could be given a lot more information on what's happening in my area, resubmissions and stuff like that, and the outcomes or the current status? Just because I get a lot of, there's a lot of people are quite scared with these changes because, you know, the public don't actually, or the ratepayers don't actually know in depth, and even me, it's hard to get my head around Plan Change 1 and, you know, all the other different playing fields that's happening that's going to have an effect on their community. So when you do a submission into anything that comes out of TA in my area, can I be briefed on that? Is that possible?
Yep.
And I'm not sure about the other councillors that would like that as well, but I do get a lot of ratepayers asking me, you know, what's happening in this area, especially in land changes and regulations and stuff like that.
Just noticed is the map that we usually have that tells you what's going on. So that is probably just the pace at which things are happening, and I didn't get it in for you, so apologies about that, but we will update that map and send it out. Similarly, if there has been resolutions of appeals in areas, and there was one I think in the Taupo district just last week, we can let you know what happened there, but also we'll try and develop a bit of collateral, 1 or 2 pages, so that all councillors know what's going on.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot, and if there is some matters of specific to region TAs, we can do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Clyde?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in regard to when council is submitting on possibly contentious issues, central government politics, etc. Just for clarity, I'd like to see that outcomes are included in the submission. For example, the vote on the bill that council made, but there was no. It was.
Can you send it through in the chat, Clyde, or an email? You're breaking up really badly.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. It's for some reason for the first time today, this is dropping out. Shall I start again?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, yeah.
Yeah, look, just when council is submitting on contentious issues like or central government politics, etc., that the outcomes of the vote on that submission should be included within the submission, just for clarity. Because if we turned that around, if we had that submission and it was supporting the Treaty Principles Bill from council, and it was a 6-8 vote, I'm sure that Karakia Tipper would not be too happy about that either if it wasn't clear, on how it turned out. So do you understand what I'm trying to say?
So you're looking for some wording around just how the vote went on that submission?
On just that submission's already gone, but in future,
Wow.
if you can, that's great. But just in future, for clarity, when it's a contentious issue, that the outcomes of the vote be included for clarity. Because it looks like the whole of our council was submitting on that particular issue, and it's for whatever reason that wasn't correct, in my opinion. And so I'd just like to see clarity when it becomes contentious political issues, central government politics, etc.
So noting that all those votes are included in the minutes and that, but I'll come to Tracy for a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, from our perspective, once we've got a decision of council, it's a decision of council, if it was unanimous or not. What we would do is take direction from council at the time if they would want that expressly stated in a submission.
Which I did do, and it wasn't done. But okay, so if that's where we are with that, that's where it is. But I'd just like to say I'm not that happy about that side of submissions. It's not okay. Thanks anyway, Tracy, and thanks, Mr. Chairman.
So thanks, Clyde, and just noting Tracy's point that if we do want some narrative around that, then we need to make sure that that is clear for staff to take into that submission moving forward.
Yep, I included that in the commentary on that day, that I'd like to have the outcome of the votes included within the submission, just for clarity, but that was overlooked.
Yep, so noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Ben.
Yeah, I realise staff have been busy, but it's just the offshore renewable energy bill. I see it says submissions are now open, but they've actually now closed, I see. Given that the offshore energy is a major part of what we were looking at in economic development here, I would have hoped we would have submitted on that. We obviously haven't, but I note over the page, page 163, there's a regulatory regime for offshore renewable energy with MB, just to make sure that we're following up and letting them know that we're very keen on the energy strategy and the work that we're doing here relating to offshore energy.
We definitely are. And we're definitely very active with a lot of meetings, a lot of people wanting to talk to us about our energy inventory and energy strategy.
No. Done? Thank you. If there are no other questions, I'm happy to move. The report be received. Thank you, Karakia. Seconded. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Just before we close for the Karakia, Tracy has just wants to speak to us after the meeting, just a quick roundup on the regional deals and where we are in that space. So not part of this meeting, but just please don't unplug and bolt super quickly once we finish up and close the meeting. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, councillors, for your great contributions today. It was a great meeting to start the year. Unuhia mai te uri tapanui, kia wātea, kia mama, te ngākau, te tinana, te hiningaro. I te ara takatū, koe rā, I rongo, I whakairea ake ki runga, kia tina, haumie hui tākie. Thanks, councillors. I'll just get my presentation.
Thank you, no problem. So meeting closed at 12:11. So being that you have another 20 minutes before lunch,